Hello, everybody. ¿Cómo están? Welcome back or welcome to the Chats with Yvonne podcast. I'm your host, Yvonne Armenta, and I am a public speaking creative. I share my love for public speaking and help you also love it. This is officially season 2 of our podcast here. It's been a while since we had a new episode, but I'm so excited for this one. Truly such an enriching conversation about the realities of existing in different spaces and using our voice to show up authentically. Now, before I introduce you to our guest, and she's hella amazing, like you'll want to meet her, I want to tell you a little bit more about this podcast. This podcast is a safe space, first and foremost, where we explore the field of public speaking, all the good, all the bad, everything. And we invite guests to share their stories in hopes that we not only realize that we engage in the art of public speaking a lot more than we think, but also to humanize a public speaking experience. I mean, it is one of the most common fears among people, and there's so much to unpack there in general, but even more for our communities who have been too often and continue to be lacking in representation in the spaces where we see quote unquote successful speakers. So, this podcast is meant to both get our confidence up and get us up in those spaces, and also help us create our own spaces because your voice matters. And you already love public speaking. I know it. We just have to cultivate the love for it. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and introduce you to the one and only Brittany Johnson. Brittany Johnson is 25 years old from LA. She's a second grade teacher, DEI chair, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion chair, and a second year educational leadership, administration, and policy doctoral student at Pepperdine University. Doesn't she already sound like a badass? Additionally, she has a BA, Bachelor's of Art, in Political Science and Social Cultural Linguistics from UCSB, and a Master's in Education in Teaching. Her interests are in urban planning, equity, DEI initiatives, school district segregation, and organizational leadership. Outside of school and work, she enjoys going to spin classes, me too, listening to music, traveling, and fun fact, she visited her 27th country in December. That's incredible. She loves family dinners and baking along the Great British Bake Off. And this is her message. We may all be on the same journey, but we each may need a different path. Do what is best for you to protect your spirit, mind, and body as you pursue your purpose. And I think that's so beautiful. So if you don't already, follow Brittany on Instagram at BrittanyXEDU, and that is BrittneXEDU. So with that, let's go ahead and get into our conversation where we talk about having access to safe spaces, a little bit about education, and how to show up authentically, and really so much more.
I am Brittany Johnson, and what I do is I teach second grade, and I work as a DEI chair for our second graders. So bringing in new ideas and lesson plans and prompting conversations during social studies about diversity, equity, inclusion, and just from a social justice curriculum standpoint, as well as being in a doctoral program. So I'm getting my education doctorate at Pepperdine. Just finished finals for my semester, thank God.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it's going as good as it can go right now. And what I love, I don't know, I love everything. I love so many things. Well, I love my puppy Leo. He's a cutie. Maybe I'll add a picture of him too in there because he's the sweetest. And I just love listening to music. I love hanging out with my family, going to the beach because I am in Santa Monica. So definitely lucky to be here. I love to read and bike and go to brunch. So
Cool. I love it.
it's kind of
No, thank you. I love it. And that actually is, I found you through Instagram, right? So you have an Instagram that
Right.
you run, and I like it because your pillars are, you include lifestyle, mentorship, all these things, and it's the intersections of who you are, right? So there's the, your
Nice.
doctoral program and what you do as an educator and all of that kind of stuff, but you don't leave the person behind. And I think that's what's really cool about your platform is that you bring those together because we just are those things. We don't stop
Yeah,
being Yvonne or Brittany because we're in
exactly.
class. So I love that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Actually, I genuinely do, because that's what I'm like hoping I'm conveying. That so many times I feel like we're like constantly trying to split ourselves up, and it's so much more work to do that.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the things that I like to point to in public speaking too. It's like we don't have to, when you're engaging in public speaking, when you're in a conference room or in front, like a stage, whatever the case is, you don't
Hmm.
have to necessarily be different than who you are normally. We show up differently in different places just naturally, I think, but you
Yeah.
don't have to not be you to show up really
Yeah.
well in those spaces. So to start off, because this my podcast is all about humanizing the public speaking experience, and I think at some point,
Right.
whether good or bad, we've all had some kind of public speaking experience, and that kind of
Mhm.
either propelled us into our journey or scared us away from it for a little bit. So
Yeah.
what I'd like to ask you is, what is your first memory of public speaking? Do you remember what that experience was like, what you felt, what you even talked about, if you remember that?
Um, so the first thing that is popping in my head is church. So my father's a pastor, and my first memories of speaking in front of people comes from being in church. And I'm gonna say it was an Easter speech. Just being thrown in there, like, remember these four lines and get up there and say it, and just it's a nice welcoming environment probably to have your first public speaking experience, because they're all your parents and church members, and you're like, you
Oh,
got this,
totally.
like, go ahead. So I think most of my first experiences speaking were either like speeches for church, or having to say a scripture or something during a like Sunday school lesson or something like that. But they definitely started in like a safe community, um in our
Totally.
communal environment. Yeah.
And very much connected to your family, right? Something that
Yes.
I always say is in our culture, I'm Mexican, and
Okay.
whether it's at dinner, whether it's during the coffee time, whatever it is, you exchange stories and you're telling them and you're retelling
Yes.
them, and you add your own little funk to it, like, oh, let me add a little joke in there. Your tone changes a little bit. That, without knowing it, is our first exposure to public speaking. So I love that you talk about
Yeah.
church, because that's something that you ideally, right? Or, if you go to church all the time, you do it almost every Sunday, every week. So it's something that you're
Yes.
engaging in. And even if you don't recognize it at first as public speaking, I think that that's our initial exposure to it. And I love that you
Yeah.
mentioned the safe space, right? And so if we can think about public speaking as from the very initial state, like, what did we feel in that moment, and why did we feel safe in that moment, and we can replicate those things, or try to, in a lot of the other
Yes.
spaces that we take up. Which also brings me to my next question, which is all about, in your doctoral journey or in your educational journey, have you engaged in public speaking? I mean, I had to do a lot of presentations for my master's, and I did a couple in undergrad, but not as many as I did for my master's. So I'm wondering, from that initial, keeping that initial experience in mind, in your journey in school, have you done public speaking, or have you engaged in the art?
Yes. Oh, and I love that, in the art. Yes, because I definitely think public speaking is such. Um, I believe I've always been involved in public speaking in some
Yes.
way. Firstly, because I love to talk. If anyone knows me, my lord, it is hard to get a word in sometimes. I am, and it might be the second grade teacher in me, I am excited about a lot of things. And it's just, I like rapid fire connections I have with that, or, just trying to build relationships through communication. And I have a lot of memories of wanting to participate in clubs in high school where we would go to elementary schools and teach them about the government and teach them about money. And that just translated over to college and being really, really involved in local policy and going to I love to participate in a public comment. So
I love it.
so, speaking there or going to protests and rallies and speaking, and then taking away from just or transitioning from more of like passions of speaking to foster community, then also speaking to build knowledge. So I'm a teacher. I'm talking all the time, and it's very nerve-wracking to speak in front of kids. I don't know if people know that, but disclaimer, it is. They are your best critics.
They keep it real, yeah.
They will. I mean, you have to come ready in your presentation appearance-wise, because sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, I think you look better with your glasses." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you. I'll think about that."
Right.
Or sometimes you'll bring up a lesson and they'll be like, "Well, mom said this," and it's a completely, sidewinded place you were not trying to go in this history lesson, and you're like, "Well, now I'm on the spot thinking." So yeah, I think in every piece of my life, there's been opportunities to speak in front of other people and be challenged to think on my feet. And it's all culminated in me being in my graduate programs, both in my master's and now in my doctorate program, with attending conferences, or, they call them elevator pitches of when someone's like, "Well, what are you studying? And what do you think your dissertation is going to be on?" And really having to,
Think on
keep their attention of something that is so narrow and really only you probably care about. So yeah, it's always been around, and I'm definitely blessed to have had so much experience with it. But I still get nervous to do it, but it's nice to have had so much practice.
Yeah, I tell people the nerves never really go away, no matter how often you do it. So if that serves as any kind of, they'll never go away, so just get through it, then I always just say that to people. But I love that throughout your journey, you've been exposed to public speaking because it's naturally has been in line with your passions, right? Now you're a teacher, you do it pretty much every day. And
yes.
One of the things that I think happens when we do it for a longer period of time, initially you may start off really nervous. I mean, again, we just said the nerves never really go away, but you start off nervous and not really. It takes you a while to learn what your element within public speaking actually is. And I think that, some people say, "Hey, how can I engage my audience a little bit more in this? How can I do that?" And while there are tips that I can give people or that we can give people, you don't really start to learn what your form of engagement works until you do it often. The bio that you have on your Instagram says that you're a culturally affirming educator. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that means and how it's centered in your journey?
Because for me, I believe that it means to have the ability to successfully teach the students in whichever way that means for you. So for me, it'll be my second graders, or it could be, a community group you lead, or whoever those people on your platform even, just to be able to teach them how to expand their thinking and how to be critical in their thinking, not only just in the way that you're going to continue to be like, "Let's talk about your history, let's talk about your troubles and your experiences or your resilience," which people love to talk about, but to really have some interpersonal awareness and cultural knowledge and a skill set to really foster impactful cross-cultural teachings. So where do we come from? Why do we come from there? How do those experiences make us who we are? How does the past bring us or connect to where we are in this moment? And being able to really dissect that and push away from a more Eurocentric model of teaching, where it may only suit one party within a particular context. For me, it would be within the classroom. So how can we really dig deeper into what we want people to know? How can we challenge ourselves as educators to find different methods of teaching this, to include students from these different backgrounds in our conversations and allow them to take agency, for me, even as a second grader, and say, I'm from Serbia. Let me tell you about that. Let me tell you about the way we celebrate Christmas, or the way that we have family dinners. Just really creating that environment to learn and to respect the learning, and then to build awareness for those learning, and then also for the person speaking. Because I mean, my second graders teach me things all the time, to like teach me new languages, new things about that they've experienced. And so, also having that, constantly being humbled of, regardless of degrees, regardless of experiences, there's everyone's different, and everyone has so many pieces to them that are all going to come together so beautifully in this classroom if we allow that opportunity to present itself. Sorry, that was a long
No.
answer,
I loved
but
every single thing of what you said. And one of the things that I love about what you just mentioned is that this kind of approach to education is a way to create agency within students, right? Because and whatever the case is in our school systems right now, you have to do certain things. You have to follow a certain curriculum, right?
Right.
But
Yes.
being able to bring cultural awareness, being able to bring the person to the work makes it so that students feel a little bit more connected to maybe something that they aren't necessarily as connected to, because traditionally it's just not taught in a way, it's not taught with them in mind, right? One of the ways that one of the reasons I got into public speaking actually is my high school was a project-based learning school. And so our curriculum,
amazing.
Yeah, our curriculum was essentially every single semester we had expos where we would, present our work and blah, blah, blah. And then we also, at the end of the semester, had a big presentation. It was about an hour and a half where we would talk about all of the projects that we had done. And they measured things like thinking critically, creativity, communication, all of that stuff that isn't necessarily measured through a standardized test, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I noticed about us as students, initially we were all like, damn, why do we have to do this? Like, this is just way too much, right? Because no one else was doing it. No one else none of our other friends at other schools were engaging in public speaking in this way and having to actually think about what they were learning. And I remember that by the end of our year, like at senior year, by the end of high school, we all appreciated it, and it actually brought us closer together as a group, because where some people were a little bit stronger in speaking or maybe thinking about their project, everybody had the opportunity to go back and revise their project if they wanted a better grade or whatever the case was. But it just felt like we were learning in community, and it was like by and for us. And so I love that you just explained that, because I'm a firm believer in that, public speaking and just speaking and talking about what you're learning and connecting it to yourself should be we should just do that everywhere.
That is the curriculum. Really, because it makes people so excited to learn, because when you see yourself in these different ways, that you not only start to believe in the ability that you have, but you also get, like, I love what you said, you also become closer with those people, because for one, you're hearing the stories that they have to share. You can be happy with them, you can be sad with them, and you're learning that your context is not the only one that exists. And I think I love project-based learning also.
Yeah, no.
Cheers to the school you went to. I love it.
Yeah. And one of the things that it does is it brings the entire person to the work, right? We all knew what we were going through. We all had our stuff that we were going through outside of school, and, we were friends in that way. But then it was like, we were also able to show up for each other as friends within the academic space, because it was so closely connected to what we were actually living and what we saw in our immediate world, right? And I think that has truly helped me understand how I can more authentically show up as myself. And sometimes it's hard, right? Because again, there's no like safe spaces and all of that kind of stuff. And you just, when you're the only one in the room, you're like, I don't know if don't want to say that, right? But
Right. Yeah.
one of the questions that I actually get about public speaking is around being authentic and how we show up in these
Mm.
spaces that aren't used to having us or that maybe just weren't built for us. So
Yeah.
how
Mhm.
how does being a culturally affirming educator, how do you, practice that? Because it is a practice, right? It
It,
takes a while to
ooh,
even, I don't even know if we ever fully achieve authenticity.
I don't know either. And oh my gosh, that's a really good question. And I will say I try to be as authentically myself as possible whenever I can. Of course, like you said, that comes with feeling comfortable in that space, I try to like work the crowd a little in a very like more reserved way and be like, okay, let's see what we can like edge closer and closer to. Especially when you are in spaces that historically have excluded you or were not created to fit you. I feel like many times people in your own community want you to hold back from that, so that you can quote unquote succeed. And then you yourself are confused on where you should stand and what's appropriate or not. Um, you know, I have no problem stating like my political beliefs, my and opinions, which I like to back up with what the knowledge I gained from reading in school.
Mhm.
And
Facts. Yeah.
I try, and um, but as I've gotten older and moved away from strictly being an undergrad, um, and trying to build this like career for myself, I've had a lot of people say like, you might want to pull back a bit
Mhm.
because that could be intimidating. That you can come off as like really like sharp and rough and always angry. And of course, there's stereotypes that play into that. So then you're really stuck in this teeter totter of trying to, really make a choice of, okay, well, who am I? Am I authentically maybe intimidating to some, or people are intimidated by me, should I say instead? Or should I just come in and be like, here, I'm just here to give knowledge and be boring and dry? And that's not who I am as a person. I love to engage with people. I like to ask questions when I present. I like, to slide in a little joke because
Right.
I personally think I'm funny. But
I'm sure you are. I say
um
that all the time and I'm like, oh, I'll see.
like,
I don't
I
know if
think
you
I'm
will think
pretty
I'm
funny.
funny.
Like, maybe it'll work. I don't know. But, you also, I feel like you're constantly, or at least I am constantly reflecting on who I am as a presenter, who I am when I go and do DEI consultations, because, I also feel that sense of community for people like me, that when I go into these organizations, do I come in as just like, I'm here to do business, let's go, stick to the facts?
Mhm.
Or do I come in as my more like upbeat, bubbly self? Um, and then how does that play into maybe what they're expecting? Are they expecting me to be this Black woman who's like, oh, it's okay that there's racism in your organization, let's figure it out? Like,
Like, I'm here to
um,
fix it all for you. You have to do nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's like, or then do I how will they listen to me if I come
Mhm.
off as, soft and then come guns a-blazing the next time? And I think there's all these questions in the back of your mind as you do these presentations and you're trying to be that culturally affirming educator, provide these definitions that you're working based off of, um, but still stay true to who you are as a person.
Right.
Um, and so at the end of the day, I've just decided, like, I'm just gonna come in how I am as a person, and I am upbeat. I would like to think I'm funny and that I'm very empathetic and kind. Um, and I love the questions. I love engagement, but yeah, I think teaching has helped that there's a time and a place for that, and then there's a time and a place to be like, but the facts of the matter are, we need some shifting, we need some changing. And I've decided that if people cannot take that or do not like that approach, then I'm not the person to work
Mhm.
with them for. Kind of like how you're saying in the beginning, like, you want to be authentic. and you want to see yourself in your own work and the work that, comes your way. And it's like, why would I pretend to be someone else and spend a year or two working with you for you to never know me, or for me to not be able to speak freely and you do the same for me, so we're actually moving along.
Right.
So that is kind of where I am. That's
Yeah.
25-year-old Brittany. We'll see. We'll
And
see.
sometimes without even knowing it, we almost pigeonhole ourselves into not being as authentic, because we're like, well,
Yeah.
if I don't do this way and I don't show up this way, then this
Mhm.
opportunity may pass me by, right? And so
Right.
it's it's
Right.
it's almost like, in a lot of ways too, I'm the oldest in my family to have gone to college, right? And my brother and I always engage in
Mhm.
this argument about, like, he's like, no, Yvonne, I don't have to go to college. I don't have to do this. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I battle. I'm like, yes,
Yes.
you're right. But like,
Yes.
I had to, so that I could, it's just this whole, it's like this back and
Yes.
forth cycle where it's like, okay, I want to show up authentically. And I know that the people that, engage with me and that I want to talk to are the people that will accept me for how I am, who I am, my
Right.
funny or not so funny
Right.
jokes, whatever the case is. But sometimes that's hard to keep top of mind, especially when you're not feeling as, on the days when you're not feeling it, you're like, man, today
Right.
maybe I'm not going to be that funny today, whatever the case is.
Yeah,
But
exactly. That plays such a big role too. I'm like, look, I don't have time for this. Like, I'm coming in to tell you what is going on. But then I think that is still being so authentic. I mean, gosh, it's like this was the perfect day for this conversation, because I started my day off today. Like, the kids were screaming. They're like, ah, the sweater. They're in their sweaters. And I just was like, okay, guys, I'm going to be honest. I was like, because they know I'm in school. And I was like, I just finished finals. And I was like, let me tell you what finals are. And I like explained it to them, and they were like, wow. And I was like, so I'm tired today. And I was like, so I need
yeah.
you, like, just try your best to match me. Just try your best. And they were like, oh, okay. Like, it lasted for about 15 minutes, but I feel like sometimes you just have to let that out. And, throughout the day, they were like, stop screaming. She's tired. But,
Aw.
they're trying. But, I think that's still being so authentic, because then people are still on your level, knowing how you're engaging with them and why your engagements are as such.
Yeah. And
So I think that's even just big.
as an educator, and as a teacher, you're in a really special place, because these are the kinds of things that students that will remember. And then when it happens to them in a workplace, or when it happens to them in the future, it won't be an offensive thing. It's not something
Mhm.
that's like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. It's something where it's like, okay, this is normal. People are communicating with me
Right.
and letting me know where they are, so that I can meet them where they are too. And that's what I've
Yes.
always thought is the hardest thing about being a teacher. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but I would imagine it's like, you're in a room with students, and they have their parents, and they're the ones that are teaching them stuff, right? But you, to some extent, also teach them a little bit more about how to see the world, how to engage with other people. And I think it's just a really incredible thing to be able to be in the classroom with people, and you, as you're learning things, almost very gently teach them those things too, about,
Yes.
like, even more than just what's inside of the curriculum or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And that's my favorite part. As much as I love policy work, it's something about being in the classroom and watching minds, like, just like tick about everything. I mean, there's there's subtle ways to bring in people in everything. Like, in math, simply changing the name of the person in a problem to maybe one that's not as recognizable, and being like, oh, that's not a funny name. Like, why is that funny to you? Boom, like, teachable moment in
Right.
math. There's
Like, there's
so
other
many
names than
ways.
just Bob. Yeah.
And Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So
gosh.
it's like there's so many little things, and they're with us 9 months of the year, hours. I mean, sometimes longer if they come to early care or stay after school program, do sports with you. So you're trying in every way to, like, mold them, like, emotionally and mentally and physically, culturally. Like, there's so many aspects. Honestly, I'm feel so blessed to be able to that people trust me to do that, and that, like, I'm able to sneak in those, like, little, like, oh, take that knowledge. become
Yeah.
culturally aware, think critically. That's all I have to say.
Now I want to shift for my last couple of questions. I want to shift over to you as a student, right? And if you
Mhm.
could tell us a little bit more about your doctoral program and what that is, and how, maybe a little bit about what you're focusing in, excuse me, and then even just as far as public speaking, what have been the main kinds of way that you've engaged in public speaking in your doctoral journey? Of course, besides the
Yeah.
the teaching.
So I am currently, my program is through Pepperdine, and I will, when I am finished, I will be receiving a doctorate in educational leadership, administration, and policy. Long name.
Ooh, sounds fancy. I love it.
The degree is going to be long.
Yeah.
So in that, it's wonderful because I am able to access so much information instead of initially I thought I'd want to do educational justice or just strictly educational policy. But with this program, I'm able to learn how to be about leadership models and frameworks and be able to learn about policy, which is what I love. And we also have these mandatory, because I also love to travel, travel twice with two our first year and our second year we get to travel to Washington DC to do policy work, and then we go internationally this upcoming summer.
Amazing.
To be
I
determined
know.
with the situation. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But and so that's really awesome. And then we get to do administrative work for those maybe educators or who are in the program who want to move up in the ranks, and maybe that's all they want to do. So there's so many pieces that we get to touch. And I mean, I've never taken a business class before doing political science and then teaching, but I've always been interested in it. I've never looked at how like technology works in different environments. So I mean, it's just like expanded my thinking exponentially and made me, even as a teacher, see the value in learning other skills. So it's been awesome. It's been rough. We are
Oh yeah.
definitely in the thick
I
of
can
it,
only imagine.
but I love to learn and I love this school. Like of course I love to learn, but the structure of school and the rigor of school and the community that a cohort brings, I'm still in school, obviously. So I like
Yeah.
it a lot.
Yeah. No, I love that because, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is I think that it's so amazing to be able to, it's almost like we expand our knowledge and realize like there's all these other things that we could do, but they all come together. They're all connected. And one of the
Yes.
things that project-based learning did for me was we had all of our classes, right? You have your math, your English, your algebra, whatever it is, geometry. But at any given moment, our history classes, our English classes, all of them had connections to them, right? And so our job
Right.
when we were presenting what we were learning or what we had learned was to find the intersections and connections between projects. And you realize that,
Okay.
like, oh, there's in history, we learned about a revolution, and then geometry, we're learning about angles and like if a revolution happens and that's 180, you relate to
Oh,
these things,
love
and
it.
it's like
Yeah.
they're connections that you
Totally.
didn't necessarily see before. And so as a teacher and in your program, I can imagine that those things happen too. It's like, wow, I didn't even think just how much this is
Yes.
intertwined with this other thing. And I think that's beautiful. I'm a lifelong learner, and I just finished
I
my
love that.
my master's in business. And my friend was like, all right, Yvonne, I know how much you struggled to get that done. She's like, so just take a breather. Don't do anything for the next, like at least the next year. I was like, yeah, but
You're like, no promises.
yeah, I know. I was like, guiltily, I already like started researching stuff because I'm like, gosh, why can't I stay away? I'm addicted to it.
Because it's so fun.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to have that mentality to understand what I'm saying. Like I have people who are like, you're ridiculous. It's not that fun. But when you can truly engage in dialogue with people on your same, okay, I mean, honestly, this happens, at a party. When people are on your same wavelength, it's just out of world experiences
Yeah.
of joy. And so when that can happen with like your daily work and the things you like are so passionate about, it's just like I leave class at 9 p.m. exhausted, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like my brain, like I need to go save 80 articles about this to my desktop and maybe get to one of them.
Yeah.
One of these days.
Yeah, exactly. Get to 1.5. Like I started the second one, didn't finish it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to learn. I'm like, I know I can't do it all.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So then, the last piece of what you had asked, could you remind me?
It was really just about like how often and what kinds of public speaking do you feel like you engage in
Right.
a little bit more through your program? And it can be like interpersonal relationships, any of that. It is public speaking.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is one for sure. In my master's program, there was not much dialogue
Mhm.
between one another. It was more like we're in it, we're learning new curriculums, how to lesson plan, how to prep. And then we went into student teaching because we had to student teach the whole time we were in my program instead of just in some programs, it's maybe a semester or two. So I didn't really spend much time with my cohort members. But this program, we have built friendships. We um go back and forth with one another over text and really have like relationships. We'll question each other and call each other out or read articles and be like, this is so you. So that's one piece of it, just learning new dynamics of how to talk to people in higher education.
Mhm.
um and then alongside attending conferences to present, we actually do a lot of presentations within my program. So I at least do 3 or 4 through in each semester
Mhm.
across classes. So that's always great practice because as you start getting further in your program, you want to start going to conferences. You want to start sharing the research that you're doing or your findings, to get your name out there and to get your work out there and start building those opportunities for collaboration. So that piece of class really helps to translate into, building up some confidence to do that
Oh,
because you
totally.
can know
Yeah.
your research like the back of your hand, but when you get in front of people, especially people who understand alphas and SS, SPSS, see, you're like, oh my
What?
gosh, like they're gonna question me. Yeah. So it's just, you know, building that confidence of knowing what you know and standing firm in that. And then, like I said, also in my program, the policy work that we do is really awesome. So when we last summer we had a research project that we had been working on, and mine was on critical race theory. And we went out to DC. I was able to meet with some senators and then some staffers, and then also some education nonprofits to be able to speak with them on their thoughts on bills and legislations that were being passed, and showing them the research I had found and how their feelings are about it. So really being on like a pretty like big stage of
Yeah.
having to like hold my own, and then also be gentle in my approach because in the summer that was like the conversation. That's
Oh, yeah.
all people were talking about, and you know trying to come in softly with that and then pounce full of surprise like haha,
Yeah.
you tricked
Yeah.
you thought this was going to be fun, it's
You
not.
thought. Yeah. I love that. And
So
I love what you
yeah.
mentioned, the smaller presentations, not small at all, I'm sure, but the presentations that you do in classes are really good practice for not only talking about what you know and really gaining confidence in that, but also even practicing how you show up as a public speaker. You can
Yeah.
decide, okay, I'm going to try out the really formal approach. Now let me try the formal plus funny approach. And then you can kind of decide, oh, I like this style better. This style makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. So by the time, and you take into account your audience and who's in the room and all of that, so that by the time
Right.
you get to do and you go to these conferences and you go advocate for policies and all of this stuff, you're a little bit more seasoned in who you are as an actual public
Yes.
speaker. Because I think that can be the larger part of the public speaking experience, and actually going up and talking to people, is you're not necessarily as sure who you want to show up as that day. And that can be the
Ooh, yes.
probably the bigger barrier in actually getting words out, because you know what you know,
Right.
just about getting it out into the world.
Yes. I definitely, one of my favorite things to do now is like to show up physically, like in my dress, in my hair, as like very like neat and it's rare that I'll have on like a bright pink dress or
Mhm.
something that maybe I'd wear to church or wear to like an event.
Mhm.
Um I'll usually have on like a nice like lavender skirt and a cream sweater. And so that way it's like, it's welcoming. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, look at this nice
And
young
then
lass.
bam.
And then I'm like, so anyway, this needs to change. And then it's like, they're already there. They're not
Yeah.
going to leave. They're just sitting there.
Exactly. I mean, that's,
So,
a lot of the times we're like,
that's the current approach.
first impressions definitely are, the colors you wear, the all of that. There's a science behind all of that, right? So I definitely agree in that sometimes, show up as yourself, right? If you like the bright pink dress, like wear it, but just, as long as you feel like comfortable in whatever it is that you're showing up as, like you'll be fine, right? And it's just learning how to adapt even live to the audience and how they're feeling and how they react to whatever you say or however you move across the stage. And
reading the room is a skill. It truly is a skill.
Oh, definitely.
I would say it's harder in academia for me, at least, because I'm like, you didn't find that funny. Okay, like we're gonna move on.
Oh gosh. Some of the public speaking engagements I've had, or like workshops that I give and panels that I facilitate, it's been so difficult to, I personally, when I'm on a Zoom call, I will unmute my microphone and like giggle if someone made a joke because I want them to hear me actually laugh, and then I'll go back on mute. But I've missed that so much about public speaking. Is like, now I don't know if my joke was actually funny. I look over and some people are smiling, but most people have their video off. So
Cameras off.
Yeah, you feed off of that energy, definitely. It's on-site research.
Yeah, and you can see by their face, you're like, okay, so that was not a good area to touch on. Like, let's pivot. Let's pivot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely think Zoom has. I'm happy we're backing away from it a little, at least like with speaking engagements.
Totally.
I mean, it's allowed me to go to so many different workshops though, which has been awesome, but it's hard.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Stressful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Brittany, I want to thank you so much for being on the Chats with Yvonne podcast. Thank you to everybody that is listening to this now. I really appreciate your story and your ability to bring all of these different things together of who you are and your different identities into how you show up on social media as a teacher, because they're just all important. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate most about sort of who you are. Is for obviously, we met on the internet, we met on like Instagram,
I could be anybody.
It's like a curated version of who we are, but I find that what I am learning, what I see about you seems to be just really authentic. And I don't know, I'm just really excited to have met you, and I'm excited that people are going to be able to listen to our chat.
Oh, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Of course, and let me tell you all, she is sweet as can be, honestly, and you're so great. Like the information that you're giving out, I'm constantly still just like, oh my goodness, I need to use that. I should do that in a presentation. I've never thought about that. So keep listening, because the insight's absolutely amazing. And thanks for having me and letting me share what I have to share. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining me for the season opener of our podcast. My love for public speaking comes from my love for people, and I love being able to connect with people like you, and by extension, with everyone tuning in. Thank you to everyone that took time today to engage with the art of public speaking. I hope you'll continue to tune in to the Chats with Yvonne podcast. Nos vemos.